Well, hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 54 of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning back into the White Knuckle Podcast, episode number 54. Today we have a guest in Dr. Erin Gaines that is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to deer. Dr. Gaines has been instrumental in developing the Expect Healthy Deer technology from real-world wildlife products. Now, I know all of you are probably rolling your eyes going, oh, this is going to be a product plug. Well, I guess in some ways it may be, but the bottom line is we believed in it enough that we felt like we needed to share with you guys the science and gals, the science behind what exactly this product is. A lot of people have the misconception that this is going to eliminate or somehow make deer immune from getting from getting EHD, and it's not. And I think once you listen to Dr. Gaines and you listen to their logic behind developing this and the way they went about doing it and how they did the studies and all that stuff, you'll get a better sense whether it's using that product, and we certainly would recommend you use that product, or another product. You make up your own mind after listening to this, but there's value in what he has to say, and there's definitely value in that product. And I think it when you boil it right down to the simplest way of looking at it, expecting healthy deer is what it does, and that in turn is going to make healthier deer herds, and that's what we're all after, because healthier deer herds make healthier fawns, they make healthier does, they make healthier bucks, and healthier bucks bring healthier racks and all that good stuff. So with that, here's my conversation with Dr. Erin Gaines. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Tonight, I am solo due to some technical difficulties. We've had plenty of those today. On the other line, I have joined with me is Dr. Erin Gaines. Dr. Erin Gaines is, I guess, on staff with Real World Wildlife Products. Is that correct, Erin?
That's correct, Jason.
All right. And you had a lot to do with some of the innovation with the recent products that they've had, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Started working with Real World back in 2016.
Okay. So a large part of what you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is, or at least what you do with them, is the research and development, I think, of the EHD technology that goes into the supplemental feeding. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Myself and Brent Ratliff, he's another nutritionist, and then Dr. Cliff Shipley. Cliff's a veterinarian that's done a lot of work in cervids, deer, and elk. So it's kind of a combination of different people that have been working on this technology over the last few years now.
Before we get too far into that, let's hear about. I know you're a hunter because I've seen your posts on Facebook. How did last year go for you?
Last year was pretty good. Had some hit list bucks and managed to harvest one during archery season. A nice mature buck, and then during our rifle muzzleloader season, really my goal during that season was to get my oldest daughter on a good buck, and she was successful. So overall, we had a really good season, and still checking trail cams, waiting for all these antlers to fall off so we can start shed hunting. But good news is I've got some survivors and should have a pretty good crop for 2018. So already preparing. So mineral sites are getting freshened up, and we're doing some supplemental feeding this year. Fortunately, we're in an area where we can supplemental feed. One of our farms is out of the containment zone. Missouri's got some chronic wasting disease containment zones, so certain counties are limited on their ability to do mineral or feed, but fortunately we've got a farm that sits outside that, and just getting ready for the new year. So excited.
So I think I probably, or you probably just answered my next question, and that was, what are your feelings on the not baiting, but the ban on feeding, supplemental feed, whatever the case may be, because somehow they're inferring that in some way, shape, or form it's going to perpetuate the CWD disease.
Yeah, that's a big topic, on its own. I'll give you my 2 cents on it. I would say I would fully support, the practice of supplemental feeding and mineral supplementation. And, of course, get the naysayers. Well, you're for it because, you're developing products for the hunting industry and for deer farmers. But, I'm convinced, based on, my experiences as a land manager, that it does result in healthier animals and, animals that are, better equipped to fight off disease issues. These are wild animals. They don't always have access to key nutrients. There's periods of deficiency. And, as land managers, we manage these animals, kind of like livestock. And, of course, you get the argument, on the people that are against it, that it's congregating animals, it can spread disease. But, I'd like to see the studies that support it. In fact, as I talk to, other people, and other biologists out there, that position's shared. And I personally, again, think it's a good thing, and fully support and, encourage supplemental feeding and mineral supplementation of wild deer populations. The whole thing on congregation, deer are herd animals. We know they congregate in ag fields. They congregate in food plots. So, again, I want to see, as a scientist, I want to see the data on proof that we are spreading chronic wasting disease through these practices, because if we are, I think most hunters, would stop doing that if they knew they're going to impact the herd. But they've seen the benefits and they continue to do it, where they legally can.
Mm-hmm. Is you mentioned deer farmers? Is CWD any more or less prevalent? And I don't want to get into a long CWD conversation, but is it any more or less prevalent in deer farms than it is in the wild?
That's a good question. Deer farmers are, from, what I've observed, their health, they got to do a lot of testing, of their herds, as far as, any animal that dies, ends up gets necropsied and tested for CWD. And so, they're held at very high standards in terms of testing and to ensure that, the herd is infected, that, that herd's managed accordingly. So, my sense is that the deer farming community is doing their part in terms of monitoring chronic wasting disease. And, certainly, you see a lot of state organizations that are, starting to do sampling of the wild deer population, but it's not every animal. I think the sample size is probably adequate, but I think the deer farmers are doing their part to manage that. And I don't think there's as big a risk as what everybody perceives there is with the deer farmers because of the testing that they're doing. So, their livelihood depends on, some of those farmers. That's what their livelihood consists of, and they want to do everything they can to make sure they don't spread the disease, because it affects their operation, their profitability. So they got a big stake in the game. Right. To make sure their animals are healthy.
Yeah, they've definitely got some skin in the game. I'm from Wisconsin, and when we had that outbreak, I don't even remember what year it was. I want to say 2001, but I don't remember if that was the year or not. But there was a lot of conjecture that these infected animals came out of deer farms, and I just think that we've largely figured out that that's nowhere close to the truth whatsoever. The only thing that we know, or at least that I know for sure about CWD, is that it's fatal, and there's nothing that at this point that can be done to stop it. So I guess we can probably end that conversation and turn it to EHD, which is certainly been a hot topic for the last, I don't know how many years, 5, 6 years, maybe longer. I know that your technology, or the technology that's gone into the supplemental feeding, the EHD portion of the real world wildlife product, it's not in any way, shape, or form a antibiotic for, or maybe that's the wrong term. You'll give me a better clinical term for it. It's not going to stop. Its purpose isn't necessarily to, cure an animal of EHD, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's not an antibiotic, and certainly are not claiming that it's going to, save all the animals out there. But I tell people it's another tool in our toolbox to help, manage against EHD virus and other diseases. And we started working on this technology back in 2012, and it really followed the Midwest outbreak. Set here in Missouri, we lost a lot of deer that summer, and as a hunter, I was really frustrated and started thinking about, what things that I learned over the years, working in the feed industry, working with a lot of different ingredients. And during graduate school, during my PhD, I did a lot of work with USDA and really focused on nutritional immunology. And so started thinking about feed ingredients that, we could utilize to provide nutrients to support the immune system, to give these animals every opportunity to fight off a disease like EHD, make sure we maintain, good rumen function, support the GI tract, and, maximize nutrient utilization in that animal. So that's really, how it started. And we started doing some field testing in captive deer right here in really my backyard. I got a couple of friends that raise deer. And so we took a couple candidate herds and started testing and had really good results. And, Don Higgins and I had actually a joint customer that suggested we get together, and it was back in April. It was in April of 2016 because it was turkey season, and we were doing some guided hunts over here in Missouri. And that afternoon, I ended up meeting Don in Jacksonville, Illinois, and we really did it as a courtesy to our customer, not thinking that there would be a path forward. And Don and I hit it off, and there were some things that, his team had that we didn't. And, and likewise, there's things that we had that Don's team didn't. So it was really a great matching for both of us, and really appreciate our customer for bringing us together to explore that. And, if you work with Don and Kevin very long, they're really big on testing their products. And so before they really got, really convinced that the product worked, they wanted to put it through more testing. And so what we did, Don has raised, deer in the past. He did it for, about 20 years until recently he liquidated his herd. But he had a lot of contacts and started reaching out to some contacts that he knew of that had problems with EHD virus specifically, because we wanted to put it to the test. And so we targeted herds that had historical EHD virus problems, and went on those herds and did a larger scale testing with the product, and were very successful that year. And after that, Don and Kevin, they were convinced that, hey, we've got something here, and we partnered at the end of 2016, and it's been a great relationship. And we've done further testing, and we can get into that more, but that's really kind of how we started with Expect Healthy Deer technology. It was born in response to the Midwest outbreak in 2012. I just felt helpless and wanted to try to leverage my knowledge to see if we could help manage that particular virus better.
So it sounds like you did a lot of studying to develop this technology in a captive herd. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we started in the captive herds. We wanted to, do a proof of concept study, and we were able to prove that out. We had two herds, and they were a mile apart. The one herd that year, the control treatment was the one that did not feed the Expect Healthy Deer technology. And then we had the treatment group, the control treatment. That farm, again, a mile away, lost over 70 animals that summer. And the herd where we fed the Expect Healthy Deer technology, they didn't lose a single animal. Again, animals were a mile apart. Wasn't a side-by-side comparison, on the same farm, but it gave us confidence that we had something, and knew we needed to scale up the testing. And Don and I got hooked up there again in April, and we had the opportunity that summer to go in and test it on. There was probably 10 to 12 herds across the Midwest, multiple states that we went across to get further, data captured on the technology. Again, Don and Kevin are just adamant about testing the products, and I appreciate that, coming from a science background. And that was our desire as well, to make sure that, what we were seeing was real. Again, knew we weren't going to save 100% of the animals, but we were just trying to help. Give these deer farmers another tool, in their toolbox to work against EHD virus. I mean, these deer farmers are using vaccines, they're using fogger technology. I mean, they're trying to do everything they can to protect the herd because of the investment they have.
Right. And I guess it surprises me, and I'll probably sound like a complete idiot for saying this, but it surprises me that EHD gets into a captive herd, because I don't, know a lot about it. I probably should know more than I do, which is why I wanted to have one of our other team members who's a vet on here, because he'd probably be able to speak to it better. But just, if we could, let's just step back for a second and tell our listeners what exactly EHD is, and how it could affect a captive herd just as well as a wild deer.
Okay. Well, EHD virus is epizootic hemorrhagic disease. It's a hemorrhagic disease, and there's different serotypes. In the Midwest outbreak in 2012, the primary serotypes were 1, 2, and 6. There's, probably 4 or 5 more of those different serotypes. Morbidity and mortality rates vary, but, mortality can be up to 100% of the herd, in severe outbreaks. But it's a really ugly disease when you get an outbreak. And, the animals that do survive it, are suspected to have some resistance. As far as some of the clinical signs, if a deer does get infected, they're going to have a fever. You're going to see nasal discharge. The tongue's going to swell. You're going to see some edema in the jaw area. And eventually, a lot of times you find them, as hunters, when we're out, you find them, seeking out water sources because they're running a fever. So they, tend to go to water, and that's a lot of times where you find them dead, is near a water source. But for hunters and deer farmers, it's just a very helpless feeling when you get hit with EHD virus.
Yeah, I remember in 2012, I believe it was 2013 around here, just locally here around Wisconsin Dells where I live. It was horrible. There was just deer, and there's a significant amount of marsh in between the city that I work and the city that I live. And just particularly through that area, I think a lot of folks found deer because there was water in a lot of those areas, and it just was something that absolutely devastated the herd. And I think anytime something like that happens to you, you certainly take more notice of what's going on, and you want to learn more about it. And so when you guys came out with this last year, I won't name the biologist that I asked, but I just told him about it, and he he didn't disagree with basically what I had given him, for what little knowledge I had and what little information that I could give him. He said, in a sense, a lot of folks think that when they hear about this, that it's a quick fix. It's going to fix the problem. And I think if I understood what Terry said in my interview with him at the ATA show, was that part of the philosophy here is that you're going to get deer healthier, which will help them to sort of fend off that disease. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's Terry gave you a very accurate picture of what we're trying to do. And, for the other piece that we've done for 2018 in that regard is we've worked on a whitetail-specific probiotic technology that we can get into a little bit more later. But the idea behind that probiotic technology is to improve gut health. And with the gut being the largest immune organ, if we can enhance that gut or provide a healthier gut, that animal's going to be healthier overall and be able to, have a better chance of, surviving some type of disease insult, whether it's EHD or some type of enteric disease challenge. So that is the goal. We're trying to provide, set that animal up to be healthier from the start, enhance the immune system if they do get challenged with a stressor like disease.
Okay. So go through, if you could, walk us through what you guys have done to get it to this point in terms of your in terms of the studies that you've done. What's brought you to the point that you guys believe in the product so much?
Yep. Well, I'll start with the larger scale testing back in 2016, where we went across multiple herds, multiple states, on farms that had a known history of EHD virus. And that was our first success. Of course, like anything, you still get skepticism. And so what we end up doing, we end up commissioning the University of Minnesota to do an in vitro study to show that some of the key ingredients in the Expect Healthy Deer technology could kill the virus. And so we did that study in the spring of 2017, worked with a veterinarian or a virologist up there, Dr. Goyle. And again, the aim was to show that we had virucidal effectiveness against EHD virus. And so what we ended up doing, and this gets pretty deep on the science, but I'll do my best to try to, walk everybody through what we did, was basically we went in and took our ingredient and we mixed that with equal amounts of EHD virus, and we used serotype 1. As I mentioned earlier, back in the Midwest outbreak, we saw serotypes 1, 2, and 6. We worked with Dr. Shipley, and he was comfortable using serotype 1. That was obtained from the National Veterinary Services Lab there in Ames, Iowa. And we basically put that virus into baby hamster kidney cells that can support infection by EHD virus, and then basically expose those cells to the ingredients that were mixed with EHD virus to determine virucidal activity. And we measured titer levels of that virus. And what we found in that study, with the different dilutions of the ingredient, we tested low, medium, high, and ultra high dilution rates. And at the low, medium, and high dilution rates, the ingredient that we looked at specifically killed 3 logs of virus. Well, what's 3 logs of virus? It's 99.9% of the virus, and we killed it within 2 hours. And then at 12 and 24 hours, we killed 2.5 logs, which is somewhere between 90 to 99.9%. And then you go to the ultra high dilution rates. The ingredient was not as effective in killing the virus. We had, less than a 1 log reduction. But the conclusion from this testing was that, one of the key ingredients in the Expect Healthy Deer technology had strong virucidal activity against EHD virus strain 1, under lab conditions. And again, it was lab conditions, but the aim of this was to continue to build the story that, hey, this technology could help, with something like EHD virus. And so going into the summer of 2017, that study wrapped up. It actually was delayed by the time we got the results, and we were a little bit behind the 8 ball. We were right in the throes of EHD season with some captive deer farms. And so we started in late June, and we went into several of the Gulf and southeastern states where you typically see EHD, or there's a higher prevalence. And we evaluated the technology again, and feedback from those deer farms was very positive. And we were able to do some side-by-side comparisons, and we're starting to pull that data together. And, we're really encouraged by it, particularly with the number of herds that we had on the product over the last 2 years. We're seeing, deer farmers adopt the technology. They view it as another tool. If they're using vaccines or foggers, it's another part of their management program. So it's a mix of, field evaluations, laboratory study, and then we've been able to do some side-by-side comparisons. So, again, we're encouraged by the technology. It's not going to be, 100% effective, but certainly showing some nice positive benefits.
Yeah, it sounds that way. So one would have to surmise that if the captive deer farmers who that's how they make their living are using it and excited about it, there's no reason that it shouldn't work similarly in the wild, because captive deer and wild deer are still deer, correct? There's not some huge difference that would genetically or biologically make them any different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the difference between a pen raised deer and a wild deer is, the reason we went into these pen raised deer is we're able to control feed intake. In a wild, we can't do those comparisons in a control manner because we can't control for feed intake. But in a pen raised situation, we can. But you're absolutely right. I mean, both animals are susceptible to the virus, and we use the pen raised animal as a model to do some testing and we can take a lot of lessons from deer farmers. I mean, again, their livelihood is, producing these animals, and they put a lot of focus on genetics and something that we can't control as hunters, but they also focus on nutrition and health. And so that is two things we can control as hunters and land managers, is the nutrition of the herd. And with some, tools like Expect Healthy Deer technology, now we can start, influencing health of the herd.
You've got this last year, and now things have sort of evolved, and I want to get to the supplemental feeding a deer here in just a second, and I just want to make sure my timeline is correct. You've got the Expect Healthy Deer technology. Now you've got the probiotic thing going on. Did that come after the Expect Healthy Deer technology?
It did. I mean, that's new for 2018, and it's probably worth discussing that, because this technology, frankly, is very groundbreaking. It makes Expect Healthy Deer technology that much better. And then the fact that, it is a whitetail specific probiotic. Well, what does that mean? Because you see people out there touting, we've got a probiotic in our nutrition, in our feeding program, or whatever nutrition product they're using. Well, what's very unique about our technology is we took isolates from deer. Dr. Shipley worked with him on this. Don't want to take any credit from him. He took isolates. We submitted them to a laboratory that we worked with on this technology, and basically took isolates that were both E. coli and Clostridium. That was the pathogens that we were able to culture. And then we screened different bacillus strains. This lab has thousands of bacillus strains, and bacillus are basically direct-fed microbials. And we were able to screen out 6 strains that were effective at inhibiting growth of E. coli and Clostridium. And both E. coli and Clostridium are 2 of the pathogens that cause enteric or gut challenges in white-tailed deer. And so by, providing, the probiotic, we can at least, target a couple pathogens that impact gut health. So again, we're trying to improve gut health, and, that animal, with the gut being the largest immune organ, if we can improve gut health, we can improve overall health of the animal. Because a lot of times with, EHD virus, there's some secondary pathogens involved a lot of times. And so we're just trying to, improve Expect Healthy Deer technology to cover multiple angles to improve health and immunity of that animal. And so it's an exciting technology. It's certainly something that is very unique. A lot of the probiotics that are out there that are being used are derived from some type of industrial process, like silage fermentation or yogurt production. But the microbial strains that we're using are patented. They're derived directly from animals, and all our screening of those bacillus strains were done against isolates collected out of white-tailed deer. So pretty exciting technology, and that is in all nutrition products with the Expect Healthy Deer technology logo.
Why is it important that it not come from yogurt or something other than an animal?
Well, the one thing with I think it's important in the fact that when it comes from the animal, we're able to you can get a little bit more diversity in terms of the bacillus strains that are they're able to have some type of effect, whether it's improvement in gut health or improvement in antler growth or whatever you're trying to improve on. And so you get a little bit broader, there's a lot more opportunity to identify strains that can be effective to, in our case, inhibit, 2 pathogens because those microbes were isolated, directly from an animal. Not to say that, a probiotic taken from an industrial process, is a bad thing. There's certainly a lot of good technologies out there. But the other key piece to this is the fact that we're taking these microbial strains from animals is we're not just using 1 or 2 different strains. We're not taking a one-size-fits-all to inhibiting, Clostridium or E. coli. We've got 6 strains in the product. We're working on screening for some additional pathogens that are common in whitetail. We may move from 6 strains to 7 strains or 8, depending on what that screening says. But it just gives us a lot more flexibility to target, whether it's trying to improve antler growth or, reduce pathogens. That's kind of our approach. It's a little bit different in terms of development from going to an industrial process and taking frankly, it's a byproduct. If you go to an industrial process, you're taking a byproduct and you're testing it to hopefully improve performance. Whereas we're going the other way. We're taking animals that are potentially high performing or a high health status, and we're isolating those microbes that are conferring that improved growth performance or improved antler production or better disease resistance, and using those microbes to develop the product.
You mentioned a couple times in there, antler growth, and I just want to clarify for everybody that's listening, based on what I'm hearing you say, that's just simply a byproduct of what you're doing. That's not the reason, the whole theory behind doing this, correct?
No, that's right. That's right. The probiotic, this particular probiotic is targeted toward improving gut health. Improve antler growth would be, an outcome because if we improve gut health, we improve nutrient utilization, so better absorption of key minerals, for example, that would be supportive of antler growth.
Right. Is there anything out there in your opinion, not to get off too far off track, but is there anything out there in your opinion that is specifically going to give a deer bigger antlers?
That's a fair question. I think, a lot of that comes down to, for the hunters is how do you effectively test that? And that's where deer farmers, they do utilize some probiotic technology where they feel like those probiotic technologies do help with antler growth. And so they're able to more effectively measure, those type of outcomes than we can, in a wild deer, population. So it seems like probiotics are used fairly heavily in the deer farming industry. Certainly, mineral supplementation as hunters, we tend to do that. And there's a whole, you get arguments on both sides on whether mineral supplementation improves antler growth or not. Those studies are hard to do because a lot of times they're, again, in pen-raised animals that are not, near as stressed as maybe a wild deer, plus they're being fed a complete diet. So those studies are hard to do. We know in the wild, as I indicated earlier, that, deficiencies exist at certain times of the year. And, if you look at livestock production, particularly cattle, we know, cattle producers supplement minerals to their cattle to improve, overall performance and health. So, I'm an advocate of mineral supplementation. I know it's important for those animals. And as a hunter, I don't want to take a risk that animal's going to be deficient. I want to make sure that we're providing the right nutrition for the animal to improve health of the does that are producing our future crops, of animals, and then also the bucks for antler growth and health.
And let me just be clear to everyone, you guys are partners of ours and all that good stuff, but regardless of partnership or not, what the message here is healthier deer, whether it's a pen-raised deer, whether it's in the wild, healthier deer if you have a healthier deer, you can expect better results with whether it's a doe, buck, fawn, whatever. That's really the bottom line that you guys are after, because one sort of begets the next, does it not?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, if we don't have a healthy animal, there's no way we're going to exploit genetic potential of that animal. That's going to be a limiting factor. So, as hunters, we need to try to remove that as a limiting factor. That's something that's in our control. Nutrition and health are in our control. Genetics are not. Deer farmers can work on all three of those areas. But, as a hunter and a land manager, I want to focus on what's in my control. And, that's why hunting's turned into a 365-day-a-year gig anymore. It's just not hunting season. You're working all year long. Do whatever you can to improve your deer herd.
I just like to make note for everyone that's listening. I live in Wisconsin. We can't, we can't do any of this feeding, so therefore I'm at a disadvantage. I'm not expecting any sympathy for that, but I guess you hear so much of this stuff on TV and what have you, and I spend plenty of time watching outdoor television, and I have a friend that's a game warden. Doing this show, I meet a lot of biologists and folks in that world, and everyone resoundingly has an opinion one way or the other as to whether or not feeding a deer mineral in and of itself is going to make antlers bigger. I think it's pretty clear. I think you've clearly said that it's not necessarily going to make them bigger, but it certainly is going to give the deer a chance to be healthier, which makes them bigger. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I think, definitely on the health front, but I would also contend that, there's times during the year, where, the animal, where there's deficiencies, where the animals are not getting all the mineral they need. And so, by providing mineral supplementation, we ensure that we do meet the animal's requirement for all minerals all times of the year. So I would say that, there is a benefit likely to antler growth as well, particularly during those times when we see deficiencies during the growing season. So a lot of times in the spring, there's deficiencies of key minerals that deer needs for antler growth. And, that's our opportunity to provide minerals to ensure we meet the requirements. Again, it's hard to quantify it because there's no controlled studies to support it. But, again, I just go back to, what we can learn from livestock farmers. There's a reason why cattle farmers supplement mineral to their cow herd that are on pastures, because
right.
The pasture doesn't provide everything that the animal needs to optimize performance and health of the animal. So
they supplement, and
they supplement.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So the FBI and the law enforcement world would call that a clue.
That's a clue. Absolutely.
Well, we've talked a lot about, the different technologies. Tell me when I can't, but when is it that we should be concerned about this? Is it a year-round thing? Is it just in the spring that, like you mentioned? Is it just in the fall? When is the best time to be, filling these voids, I guess, is really what you're saying, filling the voids that the deer have because of the time of year that they're in. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I do on our farms. We start mineral supplementation, about, this time of year. We start freshening up sites, getting ahead of, spring, when the animals are going to need it the most. The does are about ready to fawn. Bucks are going to start growing, new racks. And so we want to make sure that those mineral sites are freshened up, and we'll run that all the way into hunting season. You start getting in the rut, of course they're going to back off mineral sites and whatnot. And then, as we get past the season and get into the cold winter months, I'm starting to do supplemental feeding now on the farms. I can do supplemental feeding or mineral supplementation. We've had a really rough winter here, really cold winter, and we've had scarcity of some resources, some food resources. I actually just did a blog here recently on, one of the farms where you can do supplemental feeding. Last year I had a very poor stand as far as my real world soybeans. When I planted them, it turned off really dry. Fortunately, I had enough to get me through late season, but got in the late season. The neighbor's cows got into my food plots, got into my beans, and cleaned me out. And our ag field, of course, we had some corn stubble, but with today's equipment, there's not a lot of residual corn left. And so I looked at the situation and said, man, I'm gonna pour the feed to these guys, because I want to take advantage of making sure that any deer that comes on that property, that I hold them there. I've got the habitat, but I need to have the food. And so supplemental feeding for me, it started right after late season wrapped up, and I'm going to continue to do that, all year, combined with the mineral program, and then, of course, food plots. So for me, it's a 365-day a year gig outside of, during hunting season. So that's my approach here, in Northeast Missouri, where we can, in certain counties, do mineral supplementation and supplemental feeding.
Is there you mentioned, preparing sites. Go through that process with me, because back when I could, which was a long time ago, I just, got a whatever. Honestly, I think I went to the local feed store when they used to have those, and I picked up a block and threw it in what used to be a pasture, and where they had put minerals for the livestock, and just threw it in there, and there's still a huge hole there. I'm assuming that you're not doing that. What is it that you're doing to get the ground ready for this stuff?
Yeah, so what we end up doing, like on a new site, we typically go out, try to find an area where, it's a high travel area. And, the product we have, the Maximizer Mineral, Maximizer Plus, is granular. And a lot of times we'll, clear away if there's any leaves or vegetation, kind of clear out about a 4-foot diameter circle, and, pour, about 20 pounds, 20 to 40 pounds in that 4-foot diameter circle. and then, come back each month and try to freshen that up. And if it's on a high travel area, the deer are going to find it fast. They'll get right on it. And trick is keeping it freshened up, through the year, and it's pretty simple. It really is. I mean, deer in a natural, they do prefer a natural lick, so pouring it right on the dirt is a good thing for the deer. That's actually what they prefer. And then, having the granular formula allows that mineral to get in the soil quicker. And again, that's what they prefer, is kind of more of a natural lick type situation.
So it's going to leach down into the, I think that's the proper term, leach down into the soil, and they're essentially going to paw at that. And you just keep it basically freshened up by continuing to add to it on a monthly basis, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, that's exactly right. And, they're going to paw at it, and they're going to dig a hole. And a lot of times, one of the things I need to mention is I usually try to put it in an area where there's good drainage, because they start digging those holes, and if it's in a low area, you end up having water coming back into it. And I personally don't like that, and kind of going back to, EHD, that midge fly that transmits EHD, that's a perfect area. They end up, getting in the mud and hatching out, the larvae hatching in the mud. And then all of a sudden you got an area where you've got, a population of midge flies right where deer are starting to come to this mineral site. So I like to find an area that drains really well, so you don't get pooling of water, still water, where, midge flies can take advantage of that environment. So that's another key piece to establishing a mineral site from my perspective.
Is there anything else that you do on your farm that is different than anything that we may have heard in the past in terms of supplemental feeding? I mean, is feeding what you're feeding right now? I saw on Facebook you'd gotten one of those. I think it was a Banks feeder, right?
I've got a redneck feeder.
Or redneck. Okay, all right. Yep. And so what is it that you're putting in that? Because I'm guessing it's not the same product that we were just talking about.
No, it's not. It's a new complete feed product. It's our Maximizer Plus Pro Complete Feed, and that's a new product for 2018 that we developed. It's a 16% protein diet, about 5% fat. It provides all the key nutrients that the deer need. So it's a balanced diet. It's in textured form, so it's got whole grains, and then it's got pellets that contain the Expect Healthy Deer technology. And so, in my situation, I put some of that out back in January, and started the supplemental feeding program. So again, a complete feed, and we've tested that product. Terry actually did a lot of testing there on his farm in Kentucky, and had really good results with it. I mean, the deer just pounded. We had several people, testing it, a very good attractant. But again, the idea is to provide complete nutrition for that deer. So probably the one thing, I've used a lot of different feeders. I've used the Redneck T-Post feeders. They hold about 50 pounds a piece, each feeder. And a lot of times I do a lot of side-by-side comparisons, testing different products. I know Terry does as well, and I ended up going that 750-pound feeder. And, one of the reasons I did that is, I can fill that up and at least last me for a while, because I don't want to go in and out, that feeding area. I want to limit how many times I'm in and out, because I know, deer are probably going to be there. And I also try to pick, time of day to go fill that feeder. I typically go, during a period where there's, usually midday. Take advantage when, deer are bedded and they're not out seeking food sources. Same way with mineral sites. When I go in to freshen them, try to limit my exposure, go in once a month. A lot of times, you got trail cameras set up on those mineral sites, and I think we all, have this issue is wanting to check those trail cameras as many times as possible. And that can sometimes be a bad thing, if the more times you go in there, the more chances you're going to take of, bumping deer off your farm and, out of the area. So, That's one of the things I try to pay attention to, is just trying to reduce the number of times I've got to freshen that side up or fill that feeder up in terms of managing that to make sure I don't bump deer.
Because it's a real possibility that that's gonna happen. And being that you're a biologist, a doctor, but also a deer hunter, you're concerned with both things. So you're obviously paying attention to where you put that as well, I would assume.
Yeah, it is. And also just, being aware of scent too, human scent. When I'm filling that feeder, that feeder's tall enough, I can't dump it from the ground. So a lot of times I'll take my UTV and I can pretty much get in the back of it and, be in and out fairly quick, dump the feed out of the back and into the feeder. And the same with mineral sites, typically wear, rubber boots and try to, reduce the amount of scent I'm bringing into that area. And again, do it at the right time of day so I don't bump those deer. As much as I want to go check those trail cam cards and see what I've got, I know I need to wait, till, once a month to do that. And of course now with, cell phone technology or cellular cameras, it's making it a lot easier to manage that, if you got, cell phone access.
So we've talked about really the latter product that we've been talking about is the Maximizer Plus. Is that correct? The Pro Formula Complete Deer Feed?
Yeah, it's Maximizer Plus Pro Formula Complete Feed.
Okay, and then the first product that we talked about, and both of them have the EHD technology in it, correct?
They both do, yeah. They both have the Expect Healthy Deer technology. Anything that's got the Expect Healthy Deer logo would have it. Really, the only nutrition product that we have that doesn't is just the straight Maximizer mineral. We've got a Maximizer Plus mineral that would have the Expect Healthy Deer technology. But for the most part, all the products do have the Expect Healthy Deer technology, and the easy way to tell, there's a logo on the product bag.
Perfect. Okay, so what we originally were talking about, just so everyone understands, is the Maximizer with the EHD technology in it, and that's the stuff that you're going to pour on the ground, and it's going to leach into the soil, and that's what we were just talking about earlier. And then in terms of feeding, when we started talking about your feeders, you're putting that Maximizer Plus Pro formula in it, correct?
You got it.
Okay.
Yep.
I was paying attention.
Yep.
This is an easy job. Easy job.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, hey, thanks for taking the time to explain all this stuff. I mean, the basics of feeding deer are about as basic as the basics of rocket science, from what I can tell. It can be a confusing game, but it's nice to be able to talk to folks like yourself that have a deeper understanding. I guess the one thing that I'm taking away from it is there's no. I think a lot of people hear about it and they think, well, it's not going to get rid of EHD, and that's not what you're saying. You're just saying our goal is to make deer healthier, and in turn, a result or a byproduct of that should be their ability to fight off a disease like EHD.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well summarized, Jason.
Well, hey, there you have it, my conversation with Dr. Erin Gaines. I hope you saw the value that I talked about earlier in the show about learning exactly what this Expect Healthy Deer technology does if you're in an area of the world where, feeding is allowed. There's definite value in what they're talking about. Any nutritionalist would look at this data that they've compiled from the studies that they've done and would pretty much have to agree based on what I've been told, not by just, folks off the street, but by professionals that study things like this for a living. The University of Minnesota did some journal testing on it, or whatever it's called. And from what I'm told by Clint, our team member, who's actually a veterinarian down in Illinois, you don't just get those things published by chance. There's got to be some meat behind what it is that they're saying. So with that, I'll close out the show today. Before I do that, I just need to give you a couple of quick reminders, as I always do, and that is to give us a review on iTunes. If you don't know how to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, go and grab your iDevice and go to the iTunes store and search for White Knuckle Podcast. And this will help you to download the free podcast app that's produced by Apple. And then you can subscribe to the show from within that app. Every time that we produce a new episode, you'll get it downloaded right to your device. For Android listeners, download the Stitcher app and search for White Knuckle Podcast again. And every time, again, I produce an episode, it'll download right to your device. If you want to look up Real World Wildlife Products, their website is www.realworldwildlifeproducts.com. You can research any of the products that they have there. Not only do they have the great Expect Healthy Deer technology stuff, they've also got a ton of seeds that we've been using for several years now. I know I still have a clover stand that's 5 years old that's doing wonderful. Their Deadly Dozen, the Deadly Dozen product that they just came out with last year is one you definitely want to look into for a fall food plot. So, all right, that's about it for this week. Again, we want to thank our sponsor, Ozonics, for helping us to put on this show. Without them, we wouldn't be able to bring it to you. And without you guys and your support, we wouldn't do the show at all. So thanks to both of you for all the support. Like I said, that's about it. Jason out.